Claudette Colbert became America's highest-paid movie star in 1938. She was renowned for her performances in some of the most revolutionary movies of the decade and for her impeccable style, high glamour, and famously stunning legs, despite her celebrity status. Colbert experienced many personal insecurities. Her professional life was tainted by controversial gossip, explosive incidents during filming, and secret marriages, not to mention a complex and sinister relationship with an obsessive female artist. These factors led to challenges in collaborating with her, reinforcing her image as a diva. But there was far more to Claudette Colbert than the diva image. Let's take a detailed look at the woman who is called the epitome of chic. Before we pull back the curtain on this dark secret, I'd love to know, where are you all tuning in from? Get your favorite drink ready. Get settled. And stay with me as we navigate the scandalous lives and tragic ends of the stars we thought we knew. The story of the woman the world would come to adore as Claudette Colbert does not begin under the shimmering neon lights of Broadway or the artificial suns of Hollywood sets. Instead, it starts in the quiet, cobblestone suburbs of Saint-Monde, France, at the dawn of a new century in 1903. To understand the steel trap ambition and the profound insecurities of this cinema legend, one must first look at the world into which she was born. A world of Belle Époque elegance masking a sharp undercurrent of social and financial instability. When Jeanne-Marie Chanoine welcomed her daughter, Lily, into the world, the family was far from the glittering heights of fame. Her father, Georges Claude, was a man of dreams who lacked a definitive life calling. A former banker whose poor investment choices cast a long, suffocating shadow over their household. This was an era where class standing meant everything. And for Lily's mother, Jeanne, the marriage was a descent below her perceived station. Jeanne harbored the bitter, toxic belief that she could have been an opera star had she not been tied down by a man she viewed as directionless. This resentment did not stay buried. It seeped into the very foundation of Lily's upbringing. While her brother Charles was showered with maternal affection, Lily was viewed by her mother as the embodiment of her father's perceived failures. This psychological dynamic created the primal wound that would define Colbert's life, a desperate, unquenchable thirst for a mother's recognition that was systematically withheld. Even as she climbed to the pinnacle of global stardom, her mother would dismiss her monumental achievements with the single, contemptuous word, un. The family's trajectory was forever altered in 1911 when they made the life-changing decision to immigrate to the United States. This was the era of the Great Migration, a time when millions flocked to the shores of New York City, chasing a promise of reinvention that often proved more grueling than the lives they left behind. Setting sail from Le Havre aboard the SS Chicago, the 8-year-old Lily stepped onto the concrete canyons of Manhattan, a city pulsing with raw energy and unforgiving competition. They settled into a 5th-floor apartment on East 53rd Street. A world away from the quaint suburbs of Paris, here, Lily's bilingualism became her first shield. Guided by her grandmother, Maria Augustine Lowe, she mastered English with a speed and precision that would later allow her to navigate the complex scripts of Hollywood without a hint of a foreign struggle. However, the most pivotal moment of her youth was not an audition, but a tragedy. While rushing home to meet her mother's strict 8:30 p.m. curfew, a rule that illustrated the iron-fisted control Jeanne maintained, Lily stepped into the path of an oncoming truck. The impact was devastating. At an age when most girls were discovering their independence, Lily was confined to bed rest for 4 months with broken bones and spinal injuries that would plague her for the rest of her life. Yet, it was in this forced immobility that the actress was born. She realized that her illness brought her the attention and spotlight she so craved within her cold family dynamic. She later admitted to dramatizing her recovery, clinging to her cane long after she truly needed it. It was a performance, her very first, designed to win the love that honesty could not secure. By 1919, the transition from the fragile Lily to the determined Claudette began to take shape. while she initially sought refuge in the world of fine arts, attending the Art Students League and working as a dressmaker's assistant to fund her studies. The pull of the stage was undeniable. Her foray into acting was less of a romantic pursuit and more of a pragmatic escape. The theater offered a way to monetize her elegance and, perhaps more importantly, a way to build a fortress of financial independence against the overbearing whims of her mother. Even her name changed to Colbert was a calculated move suggested by Jean, borrowed from a famous French finance minister, signaling that from the very start. The Colbert brand was as much about financial uplift as it was about artistic expression. The early years in New York were a masterclass in survival, teaching French lessons for $3 an hour and meticulously studying the symmetry of the human face in art class. She developed an obsessive attention to detail. She learned that her face was round, but one side was more sharply contoured, an insight that would eventually evolve into her legendary demand to only be filmed from her left side. This diva behavior, often mocked by the press, was rooted in a deep-seated insecurity born from a mother who never told her she was beautiful. To the world, she was becoming the epitome of chic. But inside, she was still the little girl on the SS Chicago, trying to prove she was worth more than a mother's contempt. Every line memorized, every dress fitted, and every step taken onto a Broadway stage was a brick in the wall she was building to protect herself from the emotional poverty of her childhood. As the 1920s roared on, the Broadway scene was a chaotic, thriving jungle of over 50 live shows running simultaneously. For Claudette, it was the perfect training ground. Under the guidance of producer A.H. Woods, she learned to trust her instincts and refine her melodious voice. Yet, even as her name began to appear in the New York Times, the shadow of Jean loomed large. Her mother did not just manage her daughter, she attempted to rule her, positioning herself as a divine monarch who accepted the perks of Claudette's success while denying her the affection that should have come with it. This paradoxical relationship, total professional reliance, coupled with emotional abandonment, set the stage for the scandals and secret heartbreaks that would follow. Claudette Colbert did not just walk onto the silver screen, she ran toward it, fleeing a past that refused to let her go. The transition from the footlights of Broadway to the flickering silver screen was not a journey born of artistic passion, but one forged in the fires of financial necessity. As the Wall Street crash of 1929 sent shockwaves through the global economy, the once thriving theater district found itself laying an egg. Broadway's golden era was collapsing, and Claudette Colbert, ever the pragmatist, realized that the stage could no longer provide the security she and her family craved. While she had initially viewed movies with a certain stage actor's disdain, believing they required minimal effort, the allure of the talking pictures, and the staggering paychecks that came with them, soon changed her mind. Her early foray into film was nearly a disaster, a silent film titled For the Love of Mike, directed by a then inexperienced Frank Capra, was so poorly received it almost terminated her cinematic career before it truly began. She vowed never to return to filmmaking, harboring a deep-seated disdain for Capra that would simmer for years. However, destiny, and the relentless business acumen of her family, had other plans. Paramount Pictures, the studio that prided itself on European flair and sophisticated elegance, saw in Claudette the perfect embodiment of Parisian chic. Under the watchful eye of studio founder Adolphe Zukor, Claudette was molded into a symbol of refinement. Paramount was unique. While other studios built American city streets on their backlots, Paramount boasted a Parisian street, complete with smoky dance clubs and charming lanes. This was the environment where Claudette's bilingual talent and natural sophistication could flourish. Her image was meticulously crafted through the white look of art director Hans Dreyer, placing her in shimmering, pristine interiors that made her appear like a goddess carved from light. She wasn't just an actress, she was a brand, an epitome of chic that offered audiences a dream of splendor during the darkest days of the Great Depression. Yet, Behind this mask of effortless elegance lay a woman obsessed with control. This obsession was most famously manifested in what Hollywood insiders called the dark side of the moon. Claudette, having studied the symmetry of the human face during her art school days, was convinced that the right side of her face was inferior, round and less defined than her sharper left profile. She demanded that cinematographers only capture her from the left, a requirement so absolute that she was known to demand the rebuilding of entire sets if the architecture forced her to turn the wrong way. This was not merely vanity. It was a defense mechanism. In a world where her mother had always seen her as Claudette would ensure that the camera only saw perfection. This demand, coupled with her insistence on leaving the set by 5 p.m. to dine with her family, cemented her reputation as a premium Hollywood diva. The year 1932 marked her transformation from a rising talent into a cinematic icon through the grand spectacle of Cecil B. DeMille's The Sign of the Cross, playing the wicked Empress Poppaea. Claudette leaned into a subtle, intense sensuality that shocked and captivated audiences. The film's most controversial scene featured her bathing in what appeared to be ass's milk, actually simulated with powdered milk. Filming delays caused the milk to sour and clump against her skin, a grotesque reality hidden beneath the shimmering surface of the film. It was during this production that she also faced the predatory behavior of co-star Frederick March, when he pinched her behind during a photo session. Claudette didn't just get angry, she got professional. She secured a clause in her contract allowing her to approve all set photographs personally, a pioneering move for actors' rights that highlighted her growing power within the studio system. Her ascent reached its zenith with the 1934 masterpiece It Happened One Night. Ironically, she had very little enthusiasm for the project. Viewing Columbia Pictures as Siberia and initially disliking the script, she only accepted the role of Ellie Andrews after being promised a double salary of $50,000 and a swift 4-week shoot. On set, the chemistry between Claudette and Clark Gable was electric, a fizzing connection that sparked decades of rumors about a real-life affair. Despite the light-hearted nature of the screwball comedy, Claudette's insecurities remained. During the filming of the legendary hitchhiking scene, she initially refused to reveal her leg, deeming it unladylike. It was only when she saw the leg of a potential body double that her competitive spirit flared. "Get her out of here, I'll do it. That's not my leg," she famously declared, reclaiming her spotlight with the very assets her mother had tried to suppress. The film swept the Oscars, and though Claudette, convinced she would lose to Bette Davis, had already boarded a train to New York, she was rushed back to the ceremony to accept her award in her traveling clothes. By 1938, she was the highest-paid movie star in America, earning over $426,000 annually, a fortune managed with an iron fist by her mother and her brother. Charles, who had changed his name to Wendling to escape his French roots. To the public, she was the woman who had everything: the fame, the wealth, and the adoration of millions. But the mask was heavy. Her modern marriage to Norman Foster was a facade, a hollow arrangement dictated by her mother's refusal to let him enter their home. She lived with her mother, grandmother, and aunt, while her husband lived miles away. She was a queen on the screen, but in her own home, she was still a subject to the divine monarch that was Jean Chanoine. This tension between the glamorous public persona and the stifled private reality was a ticking time bomb, set against a backdrop of studio rivalries and the emerging shadow side of her personal life. While the world saw Claudette Colbert as the sovereign queen of Paramount, a woman of unshakable poise and independent wealth, the reality behind the closed doors of her residence was far more sinister. The tragedy of Claudette was not just a result of Hollywood's notorious ruthlessness, but of a domestic imprisonment orchestrated by the very people who were supposed to protect her: her mother, Jean, and her brother. Charles, who had reinvented himself as Charles Wendling, did not merely manage her career. They colonized her life. In the studio's eyes, Claudette was a powerhouse who could command $150,000 per film. But in the family's ledgers, She was an asset to be guarded and milked. This suffocating control created a profound paradox the more famous she became, the less agency she possessed over her own heart. The first major victim of this family machine was her marriage to Norman Foster. To the public, their modern arrangement, living in separate residences, was marketed as a chic, Parisian-style romance of two independent artists. In truth, it was a humiliating compromise forced by Jean's visceral hatred for Foster. Jean refused to let Foster even step foot inside the family home. And Claudette, still the wounded child seeking her mother's approval, lacked the courage to move out. This arrangement turned their marriage into a series of fleeting encounters, shadowed by the watchful eye of a mother who saw any outside love as a threat to her financial security. The tension finally exploded into physical violence when Charles, acting as the family's enforcer, savagely attacked Foster. The burly brother beat the Indiana-born actor so severely that he broke his nose, in a twist of dark irony. Claudette took her battered husband to see Dr. Joel Pressman for repairs, only to embark on an affair with the surgeon while her husband was still under his care. The betrayal was total, leading to a Mexican divorce in 1934 that marked the end of her grand amore and the tightening of the family's grip. The studio system itself was equally predatory, demanding total submission to the image. During the filming of Cleopatra and the Sign of the Cross, Cecil B. DeMille treated his stars like beautiful cattle. Claudette, recovering from a painful appendicitis, was forced to stand for hours in heavy, stifling costumes under scorching lights. Her physical suffering ignored by a director who viewed sickness as a moral weakness. The enemies of fame were everywhere, from the studio moguls who saw her as a puppet to the gossip columnists like Hedda Hopper, who prowled for any crack in her epitome of chic facade. Rumors began to swirl about her sexuality, fueled by her unusual living situation and a notorious 1935 party hosted by Carole Lombard. A single photograph of Claudette and Marlene Dietrich in a suggestive pose on a slide became a lightning rod for speculation. While Dietrich allegedly dismissed Claudette as a shop girl, the press painted a picture of a secret, sapphic Hollywood underworld that threatened to shatter Claudette's carefully constructed reputation. Yet, the most toxic relationship in Claudette's life was not with a lover or a director, but with the woman she came to call the monster Verna Hull, an heiress to the Sears Roebuck fortune. Hull was an obsessive, voyeuristic artist who insinuated herself into Claudette's inner circle as a companion and chauffeur. When Claudette and her second husband, Joel Pressman, relocated to a plantation home in Barbados to find peace, Hull followed, moving into a house directly adjacent to theirs. Hull's obsession was so invasive that Pressman was forced to erect a physical barrier between the properties to keep her away. Hull's presence was a cancer on their marriage, a constant reminder of the secret marriages and hidden insecurities that Claudette could never fully escape. Amidst this personal turmoil, Claudette faced a professional blow that would haunt her for the rest of her days. In 1949, she was cast in the role of a lifetime Margot Channing in All About Eve. It was a character that perfectly matched her elegance and wit. However, fate intervened in the form of a severe back injury, a lingering consequence of the truck accident in her youth, which forced her to withdraw just as shooting began. The role went to her rival, Bette Davis, who used it to revitalize her own flagging career and secure an Oscar nomination. For Claudette, it was a moment of agonizing what-ifs, a realization that the system she had served so faithfully would move on without her the moment her body failed. The climax of her domestic tragedy occurred during the final, agonizing days of Joel Pressman's life, as Pressman lay dying of liver cancer. The monster Verna Hull delivered a final, unforgivable blow, while Claudette kept a vigil at her husband's bedside. Hull sent a letter through a maid, insisting it be read in private. The letter claimed that during a secret altercation, Pressman had revealed his intention to kill Claudette so she couldn't live without him. This psychological manipulation of a dying man's state was designed to shatter Claudette's love for him in his final hours. in a rare display of raw, unpolished fury. Claudette finally broke her diva composure. She threw every gift Hull had ever given her back in her face and banished her from the island forever. But the damage was done. The peace she had sought in Barbados was forever tainted by the shadow of the woman who had tried to poison her last moments with her husband. Throughout all these crises, the most profound betrayal remained the one orchestrated by her mother. In a chilling revelation late in life, Claudette confessed to designer Arnold Scassi that she had undergone an abortion during her marriage to Foster. Not because she didn't want the child, but because Jane had convinced her that motherhood would tarnish her image as a love goddess. Foster was devastated, his heart broken by the decision to sacrifice their child on the altar of Claudette's career and Jean's greed. She would never have another child, leaving her with a multi-million-dollar estate but no one of her own blood to inherit it. She had traded her chance at motherhood for a love goddess label that her mother alone had ascribed to her. A label that felt increasingly like a shroud as the 1950s approached and the scripts began to dry up. The crushing machine of Hollywood and her family had taken everything from her first great love, her chance at being a mother, and the roles that could have defined her legacy. As the studio system began to crumble with the 1948 Paramount decree, Claudette found herself an independent agent in a world that no longer valued the sophisticated, bilingual elegance of the 1930s. She was forced to take physically demanding roles in B pictures like Three Came Home, even consenting to be filmed from her unfavorable side to stay relevant. The mask of the Epitome of Chic was cracking, revealing a woman who was tired of the fight, tired of the controlling mother who still mandated she be home by 7 p.m. for dinner, and tired of being a diva in a town that was quickly forgetting why she was ever called a queen. The twilight of Claudette's life was spent in a luxurious but solitary exile on the serene west coast of Barbados. After the vibrant era of classic cinema began to wane, she retreated into a 19th-century plantation home that she had painstakingly renovated. For many old Hollywood stars, the transition from the screen to retirement is often a painful descent into irrelevance. But Claudette sought a different path, finding peace in the simple freedom of swimming in the Caribbean Ocean. Yet, the quietude of her final years hinted at a lingering Hollywood tragedy, the slow fading of a woman who had spent decades suppressing her own desires for the sake of her public image. By the late 1950s, her cinematic career had effectively concluded, leaving her to navigate an industry that no longer prioritized her sophisticated wit. In this seclusion, the untold story of her lifelong struggle for independence remained a private burden. The physical decline of this legend was marked by a series of mild strokes that gradually sapped her legendary vitality. On July 30th, 1996, the world lost one of its most enduring lights when Claudette Colbert passed away at her Barbadian home at the age of 92. Her passing was not a grand public event, but a quiet departure from a life lived on her own terms at the very end. Even in her final moments, she remained the epitome of chic, reportedly wearing her signature makeup as she died, a final defiant act of the diva persona she had cultivated so fiercely. This orderly exit was characteristic of the control she once exerted over every film set. Her death didn't just mark the end of a person, but the sealing of a vault containing more than one Golden Age scandal. Following her death, her body was returned to New York City, where her American journey had begun. A solemn requiem mass was held at the Church of St. Vincent Ferrer in Manhattan, attended by the few colleagues who still remained from the studio era. Her ashes were subsequently flown back to Barbados to be interred in Godings Bay Church Cemetery, placed eternally between the two people who had most dominated her life, her mother and her second husband, Joel Pressman. The distribution of her $3.5 million estate sparked significant public interest, especially since she had no children, a direct result of the Hollywood tragedy regarding her forced choice between career and family years earlier. By leaving her fortune to Helen O'Hagan, Claudette left the world with one last untold story, a final mystery for the fans of the Golden Age to ponder. To look back at the beginning of this journey is to see a shimmering epitome of chic, a woman with famously stunning legs who stood at the absolute pinnacle of Paramount Pictures. Yet, as we pull back the curtain on this untold story, the contrast is staggering. The woman who commanded the highest salary in Hollywood in 1938 was the same woman who lived in a state of domestic servitude to a mother who withheld the very recognition she yearned for. Claudette Colbert's life teaches us that the price of global adoration is often a profound personal bankruptcy. She traded the chance at motherhood, her first grand amour, and even the physical integrity of her own face, obsessing over the dark side of the moon, to maintain a facade of perfection. We are drawn to her Hollywood tragedy because it mirrors the universal human struggle, the desperate attempt to find love in a system that only values us for our utility. This tragedy was not merely a string of personal misfortunes. It was a systemic indictment. The golden age of Hollywood was a factory of dreams built on the backs of slaves to the studio contract. From Cecil B. DeMille's disregard for her health to the media's relentless thirst for a golden age scandal, Claudette was a product to be consumed. Her story serves as a haunting reminder that the way we treat our icons remains ruthlessly unchanged today. Whether it was the studio moguls controlling her marriage or an obsessive artist like Verna Hull preying on her insecurities, the system was designed to isolate her until only the star remained. However, we must not remember Claudette Colbert solely as a victim. To do so would be to ignore the brilliance of the woman who swept the Oscars and negotiated record-breaking contracts as a fierce independent actress. She was a trailblazer, a relentless hard worker, and a brilliant businesswoman who understood the power of her own brand. Her legacy is etched in the sharp wit of "It Happened One Night" and the regal defiance of Cleopatra. She proved that a woman could be both the epitome of chic and a survivor of the darkest corridors of Tinseltown. Claudette Colbert's life reminds us that fame is a fleeting light, but the strength to endure the shadows is what truly defines a legend. She remained her own master until the very end, even doing her own makeup as she slipped into eternity. Before we finish this video, which of Claudette Colbert's roles did you enjoy the most? Do you think her legacy is defined more by her talent or her resilience? Leave a comment below. If you'd like to hear more untold stories from behind the scenes of Hollywood, don't forget to like and subscribe.